Hey guys, my name is David, and you are watching Stories Told. Today, I am going to explain a 2020 remake of the 1990 movie, The Witches. Please be aware, the video contains spoilers. We start the movie with Chris Rock narrating a presentation about witches living amongst people in disguise. You can never be too careful, as a witch can be a nurse, your neighbor, or even your teacher. We learn from Chris that witches hate children, and whenever a lady offers you a candy, you better be sure it is a witch. We jump back to 1968, and the narrator starts telling his story. He was a young boy living in Chicago. That winter, they suffered a tragic car accident. His mom and dad didn't wear a seatbelt and lost their lives in the accident. Chris Rock's grandmother came to pick him up, and took him into her care. She puts him into his late mother's room, where he finds tons of pictures and belongings. Grandma prepares a plate full of wings for him, but Chris just sits there, staring into the abyss. She tries to cheer him up with old school music and dancing, but Chris is more into EDM. Grandma gives a preach about the Lord's ways of doing things and that nothing ever happens without a reason. She tries to get through with Chris and it seems to be working, as he finally takes a bite and smiles for the first time since he is there. By the way, I only call him Chris, because the movie calls him Hero Boy, which makes me want to quit life every time I write it down. Anyway, Grandma gets a CGI mouse for Chris, which he names Daisy. She then washes Chris's hair with Fanta and we see a montage of Chris and Daisy bonding. As time flies, Chris gets more and more comfortable with his new life. We see the first witch, casually peeping on them 2 feet away from the window. We see a grandma and Chris visiting a general store. Grandma coughs more and more, indicating that she has some kind of illness. Chris meets the witch from before between the aisles. She offers him a candy, with a snake wrapped around her hand. Without the snake, it would be too easy to trick kids into accepting candy. Grandma shows up just in time and the witch disappears. Chris tries to tell her what happened but she tells him to save it for later. She coughs in her tissue and there is supposedly blood on it. They go home and Grandma asks him what was he trying to say in the store. Chris tells her what he saw and Grandma tells him she was a witch. She tells a story about her childhood friend, who accepted a candy from a stranger. She got scared and ran off. She saw her friend alive and breathing the same night, but the next morning, she started turning, and in no time, she turned into bad CGI. The other people living in the village never believed Grandma. She heads into the closet and shows Chris her healing crystal collection. She tells him they are leaving to a hotel, where they will be safe. Grandma has connections there and thinks that witches don't go near wealthy kids, as they prey on the overlooked kids that nobody cares for if they go missing. On the way, she tells him about the Grand High Witch, who gathers the other witches and gives orders to them. They get to the hotel, where we see a banner, welcoming the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. They head to room 766 and the so-called society arrives just after the elevator doors close. We get introduced to the Grand High Witch and her lovely company. The hotel manager tells them that animals are not allowed in the hotel, especially if they look like they are from the 1990 version of the film. Grandma tells Chris that she must be coughing because of a witch, as the witch made her cough. She describes them as bald, their mouths stretching up to their ears. They wear gloves, because they have claws and only one toe. Their nostrils can stretch up when they smell a child, as they don't like the smell of them. As they go to sleep, the cat jumps down from their window, straight back to the Grand High Witch's bedroom. The cat tells her what she saw and we switch to the next day. Grandma wakes up late and Chris already ordered food for her. Chris goes to explore the hotel and takes a peek inside the ballroom, when a kid, named Bruno interrupts him. He tells Chris that a nice lady told him to meet there at 12:25, as she wants to give him 6 bars of Swiss chocolate. Bruno's mother comes and takes him away and Chris enters the ballroom. He finally found a quiet spot where he can train Daisy. The lights come on and the witches enter with the manager. Chris hides under the stage as the witches walk in. They block the door and Anne Hathaway gives the order to remove their gloves, shoes and their wigs. Good thing they wear wigs. Being bald would be more suspicious than the Joker cosplay they decided to not cover up. Then we see a scene that makes you forget that Anne Hathaway won an Oscar.
Rubbed out. Squashed.
This goes on for a while, so I let you cringe as a punishment for making me watch this movie.
Skeetered and fritter. Repulsive little brats playing in the sand. Kids for nothing burns.
She kills one of the witches for asking a question, then she explains. The Grand High Witch called the gathering to tell the other witches to open up in each and every town a candy shop and sell only the highest quality candy, poisoned with a formula that turns children into mouse instantly or in 30 minutes. She tells them she has the money in her room to set up the shops. I'm sure a shop which turns kids into mice would go unnoticed. Witch hunts suddenly make more sense now. They are planning to test the formula on Bruno, the kid that Chris met earlier. She starts smelling Chris under the podium. She flips the whole thing, and about to find Chris in the vent when Bruno knocks on the door. By the time he enters, everyone is wearing their disguise. The witch blocks the door, and that is a perfectly normal phenomenon. Bruno is so greedy for that chocolate, that he runs towards her shouting, "Give me the chocolate." Bruno turns into a mouse, but even in this form, he keeps asking for the candy. She tells the witches to squish him, not like she could just kill him with her finger like before. The witches miss every step. Meanwhile, Chris is watching the events unfold. Daisy decides to talk now and run out to save the Bruno's life. Not like she could have revealed way before that she was also a kid without a problem, since she heard Grandma and Chris talking about witches 1,000 times. They chat for a second in the vents, before the Grand Witch pulls Chris out. They turn him into a mouse as well. They are looking for a mallet to kill him, but Daisy runs out and rescues him. All three of them manage to escape, and the Grand Witch accidentally puts her hands into the vents, cutting it several times. They find the kitchen and decide to sneak through it Remy style. They reach the elevator and enter it, just before it closes. The two-person in the elevator is also blinded by the horrible animation in this movie, so they don't even notice three mice entering. They manage to get to Chris's room and find Grandma. He introduces the others to Grandma, and she even asks why Daisy didn't say a word before. We get no answer, but at least they tried. Daisy's actual name is Mary, as we learn. The hotel maintenance rings the bell and says they might have a mice problem, so they are putting mice traps in every room. They make up a plan to reverse engineer the potion, which makes sense since Grandma used to work at NASA just a few years back. The Grand Witch's room is just beneath them. You get it, room 666? How smart. She puts the potions in a big bowl of ice. Grandma lowers Chris down and he runs inside. He quickly grabs one of the potions but hides under the sofa as the witch enters the room. She opens the luggage where she keeps the money and takes out a few $1,000 notes. Chris waits for her to lock the luggage again and turn around to make himself more noticeable. He gets into the makeshift elevator, but the witch grabs it just in time. The witch feels like she knows Grandma, but she isn't sure. The doorbell rings, so she lets go of the sack and heads to open it. The manager comes and brings a cage for the cat, and we learn that witches don't like garlic, so they go with a pea soup in the evening. Grandma tries to make the anti-mouse potion, but she fails once and decides that she tried everything. Chris reassures Grandma that he likes to be a mouse. After all, not having to attend school is worth the 2-year lifespan of a mouse. He asks her if his friends can stay too. She of course agrees. Chris gets a brilliant idea to mix the stolen potion with the pea soup, so every witch will turn into a mouse. He gets into the kitchen and manages to mix the potion with the pea soup. Let's just hope the chefs aren't doing their job properly and won't taste the soup before it goes out. Meanwhile, Grandma decides to look for Bruno's parents. She finds them in the lobby and decides to pull out the mouse. Bruno decides to not say a word as his brain also shrunk. In the next scene, Grandma gets seated at a table, where she can watch the witches having dinner. They all start feasting on the soup, except the Grand High Witch. She is about to taste the soup when she spots Grandma again. She puts down her spoon before even tasting the thing. She stands up and decides to approach her, as she finally remembers her. She tells her she remembers how she turned her friend into a chicken many years ago. As Anne Hathaway tries to act, the mice in the bag steal the key from her. The witches start turning into rats, which isn't really bothering the other guests in the restaurant. They only start panicking when the rats run towards them, because people blowing up and turning into animals is just another day in Alabama. Grandma walks out as the staff tries to fight them off. She and the mice enter the witch's bedroom to steal all the potions. She drops one of them and it rolls under the bed. The mice go down to retrieve it. The Grand High Witch of course returns while Grandma is packing the spice. Chris comes up with a plan again. Luckily they have plenty of time to execute it as the witch decides to slowly extend her arms instead of walking towards her. Bruno and Daisy slip mousetraps under her toes. Chris then goes full Evel Knievel, launching himself and a potion into the witch's mouth. She turns into a rat, so we can finally bury Anne Hathaway's performance. At least that's what I've hoped for. She keeps on screaming and chasing them in a rat form before Grandma traps her. Chris gives Grandma the key for the money trunk. She opens it and finds a book full of names and addresses of the remaining witches in the world. They plan to turn every witch into rats with the potions and money they are about to borrow. Before they leave, Grandma opens the cat cage and lets Hades out. The cat then murders the Grand High Witch as the mice and Grandma walk out. Bruno tries to tell his mother again what happened, but she wasn't really an animal lover, so Bruno stayed with Daisy and Chris. We switch back to Grandma's house where they love being a mouse as they can build a private roller coaster for the fraction of the price of a real one. Chris asks Grandma how long a mouse lives and she tells him about 3 years. She also reassures him that he could live for even 9 years, as he isn't an ordinary mouse. What a lucky boy. They continue to have fun as depression is a non-existent thing in this world. We then see pictures of them traveling around the world with a witch hunter's caravan. We switch back to the old Chris, who is literally giving kids a potion to hunt witches. Child soldiers always turn out to be good. This was The Witches from 2020. A disgrace to the original 1990 version. I hope you enjoyed it at least as much as Anne Hathaway.